who stayed for the best session of the meeting. I'm a little biased, but we're going to be talking about carbon and hydrogen hubs and their development. My name is Chris Carter. I'm with the Pennsylvania Geological Survey. I work out of the Pittsburgh office. And in Pennsylvania, the Geologic Survey is associated with the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. So I'm a petroleum geologist for the state, and we've worked on carbon storage for almost 20 years with folks in other states like Jessica from West Virginia and other places. So for our panel this morning, we're going to be getting comments from three folks. I'll introduce them now and then just let them speak, and we'll have our Q&A at the end. Becky Keogh is a cabinet secretary for the Arkansas Department of Energy and Environment. We also have Glen Murrell, who serves as the executive director of the Wyoming Energy Authority. And last but not least, Bob Schrecengost is the acting division director of DOE's Division of Hydrogen with Carbon Management for the Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management. Take it away.
So thanks very much, Chris, and thanks to the Great Plains Institute for setting up this really informative conference. Despite the name of Hydrogen with Carbon Management, my division deals mostly with hydrogen production and utilization. So I did learn a lot yesterday, so I appreciated all the in-depth talk about the CCUS side of things. I guess I should, there we go. So roughly a year ago, Senator Granholm announced the first energy earthshot, the hydrogen energy earthshot. It's an all hands on deck and all pathways are a valid approach to producing clean hydrogen at the target cost of $1 per kilogram within 1 decade, a very aggressive goal. So when that was announced in FECM, shorthand for Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, we initiated a study with NETL to identify promising carbon-based pathways to achieve the cost target. And we included not just costs for these pathways, but also a full life cycle assessment of carbon intensity. So we wanted to identify both pathways that were promising on a cost basis as well as pathways that were promising on a carbon intensity basis. Because we do need to achieve the bill standard of 2 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilogram of hydrogen produced. So we had NETL analyze several cases for carbon-based pathways to clean hydrogen. We had base cases that were steam methane reforming without any carbon capture and coal gasification without any carbon capture. And then our pathways to clean hydrogen included SMR with carbon capture, as well as autothermal reforming with carbon capture, gasification with carbon capture, and then our most aggressive carbon intensity case was co-gasification of waste carbon streams that also included enough biomass to achieve a net zero carbon hydrogen. So I do have a link up here. The report is available at that link. I do want to give a shout out to NETL. Their LCA team is world class. When we were going through concurrence for this report, it's kind of funny, we actually had to justify why our SMR baseline was higher than some of the other offices that were reviewing it, and so they really weren't biased towards the fossil sources. They really did do a rigorous life cycle analysis. The report's very transparent. It lays out all the methodologies, and so it's really useful to external stakeholders, but it was very useful to us as well because it is guiding our R&D efforts over the next couple of years. And when you look at that report, I guess the big takeaway I have is even after you get 95% carbon capture, especially on natural gas-based technologies, you still have a significant hit in carbon intensity from methane leakage in the upstream at the production wells and through the pipelines as well. So that's really the biggest challenge right now for those pathways. And we did establish a division of methane mitigation with a lot of R&D to address those issues. So this slide is just basically a little cartoon of various elements that could be included in a hydrogen hub, and then some of the highlights of the bill provisions where there are incentives for hydrogen production as well as carbon capture. Want to mention that Holly talked a lot about the stakeholder engagement, and so as we were developing documents to fund these provisions, we have had quite a few listening sessions with tribal organizations, labor unions, environmental justice communities. We've had public webinars on the subject, over 1,700 attendees there. We've engaged with 85 industrial coalitions and associations and environmental organizations and national labs. So that was a big part of our information gathering as we develop our approaches to funding opportunity announcements for these provisions. So first I'll talk a little bit about the hydrogen hub provisions in the bill. These are actually being led by DOE's Renewable Energy Office, specifically the Hydrogen Fuel Cells Technology Office there. But FECM and nuclear energy as well have very broad priorities here as well. One of the hubs is supposed to be fossil-based and one is supposed to be nuclear-based. So we're really jointly between our three offices as well as some other offices developing all of these documents. So there's $8 billion for hydrogen hubs, as everyone knows. There's another $1 billion for the Clean Hydrogen Research Electrolysis Program. They do have an aggressive target as $1 a kilogram as well. Their base costs are a little bit higher, but electrolyzer development is hopeful to meet those cost goals also. Besides these, and then there's a Clean Hydrogen Research and Development recycling program there for manufacturing and recycling, $500 million that are available there. There are other bill mandated elements. We are working on a National Hydrogen Roadmap and Action Plan. That's also mandated to be produced in the bill. And so these documents are going to be released in the coming weeks. And so keep tuned for these. There's a link there to where these funding opportunity announcements will be housed. And when this is distributed, all these links will be active, so don't worry about taking notes or anything. But that's where you'll find all the releases on hydrogen hubs. So for the carbon management provisions in the bill, FECM is leading those. So when these are issued, these documents will be posted on the NETL website. The link again is there. We've made a specific section just for bill documents, so everything in one place and easy to find. So we've got $3.5 billion for direct air capture hubs, as well as a prize competition with $115 million allocated there. The carbon dioxide storage validation and testing has another $2.5 billion, and the carbon utilization program under that has another $310 million. For CO2 infrastructure is supported with $100 million in FEED studies under the carbon capture technology program, and a large loan program, the CO2 Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. It's got $2.1 billion authorized there. That one we're organizing with the Loan Programs Office. We really don't want to set up our own Loan Programs Office, so they'll be administering that for us, but we're working with them right now to set that up. And critical minerals and materials is an interesting thing in the bill as well. We've done a lot of research in extracting these from coal wastes, coal finds from washing plants and things like that. Some very promising work being done there. And so the rare earth element demonstration facility is funded there at $140 million, as well as rare earth mineral security for another $127 million. Okay. So here's a summary of the major bill provisions. Kudos to the carbon management team. They've got their notices of intent out. We have a few more reviews to go through because we got 3 different offices involved, so a lot more DASs are looking at it. So our approvals have taken a little bit more. We did collect nearly 10,000 pages of responses to our RFIs, so wanted to use that valuable information in formulating our notice of intent and then further our FOA. And so these will be coming imminently. Stay tuned. It's not going to be much longer, but I can't say much more than that. And I'll just give a closing slide. This is kind of a snapshot of how the carbon management team is approaching looking at potential sites. So we funded a lot of capture feed studies, and ideally you pair them up with a storage option as well under the Carbon Safe program. So you can see several coal plants. There are a few more natural gas plants that have been rewarded recently that we have not added to this map yet. But this is kind of a snapshot of how we're looking at the carbon management sides of things. And you'll notice the San Juan generating station there is a recipient both of a feed study and a carbon safe project as well. So with that, hey, thanks for inviting me very much. It's been a great conference, and my contact information there is anyone. Feel free to reach out at any time, and I'd be glad to have a briefing or talk with you further about anything of interest. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Glen Murrell. I'm with the Energy Authority in Wyoming. I don't have any slides either. I'm one of those simpletons. But we'll keep it brief. I'm going to talk about three things as well. What is the Energy Authority, so you understand who I work for and why we do what we do. Talk about the Wyoming energy strategy and the role that hydrogen plays in that. And then I'll talk about our hub concept moving forward in pursuit of those issues. So the Energy Authority is a very small agency in Wyoming. It was set up to act as a central sort of hub for coordination across different agencies for Wyoming, and the mission is quite brief and quite succinct. It's to secure and sustain the energy economy of Wyoming, which is no small task, given that Wyoming has the third largest energy economy in the country. If it were a country, it'd be the size of Norway, which is no slouch in energy production as well. And but that's the mission, right? So one would think that we have dozens of staff members and a multi-million-dollar budget. We don't. There are 4 people in the office. You have a 12-person board, though, so 12-person board for a 4-person office. That's government work for you, but and very productive because of it, I assure you. But we have that very broad mission, right? And it is a challenging job because of that scale of issues, right? There are actually a few things about the Wyoming energy economy which are quite unique. First of all, it's actually not only is it very large, it's very diverse. There's coal, oil, gas, wind. Solar is not too bad. Uranium, we have an advanced reactor in development in the western side of the state. We have carbon management systems. We have hydrogen prospect as well. Goes on and on and on. And that sets it apart from many of the other bigger players in the country, which are typically more dominated by a specific energy type. Another interesting aspect is we export 90% of our energy production actually ends up in markets outside of Wyoming. So that means we're very beholden to external market forces. Even if they're domestic, they're still external to Wyoming's perspective. We also have we have a commodity curse. We have a very, very low value energy production system where we get it out of the ground, put it on a train, and it's consumed elsewhere. $15 a ton for coal. If anybody has been building a home at the moment, they'll realize that building aggregate runs for about $18 or $20 a ton, right? So coal is literally cheaper than dirt, right? It is not, unfortunately, that's the truth. The other thing about the Wyoming sector is that at the government level, it's very decentralized. There is no Department of Energy, as there is a Department of Agriculture for the second largest sector. There's no DOE for Wyoming either. And that's why we step in and we play that central role of trying to make sure that everybody's pulling on the same rope at the same time. That's how we function and what our mission is. And to do that, we have the statutory obligation actually to develop and administer the Wyoming energy strategy. That's how we create or influence all the other efforts within the state, not just public, also private. So moving on to that. The energy strategy of Wyoming has to be built in such a way that it pursues that mandate, secure and sustain the energy economy. And to cut to the chase and not really get into too many details, We've adopted an all-of-the-above approach that we utilize all of our resources and all of our infrastructure and all our human resources, but it has to be a net zero, constrained by a net zero aspiration. Right? This is Wyoming. We have a net zero aspiration. It is a transformative vision, not a transitional vision. We want to, like I said, we want to continue utilizing our resources, but in a responsible fashion and in a way that preserves the economy overall. So in that context, if you think about that resource base that we have in the state, very heavily hydrocarbon-based, hydrogen, if you know a bit about it, it presents an incredible prospect for enabling us to continue to use all of those things, resources, infrastructure, and other things, in a way that continues to provide us access to the markets that demand those low emissions, decarbonized fuel types, right? We have a diversity of feedstock. We have coal, natural gas, everything else, wind, so on and so on and so on. We have abundant infrastructure, so pipeline transmission. The I-80 corridor is essentially a strategic transcontinental infrastructure corridor that we utilize heavily. We have the human resources. We have the Wyoming energy worker and the society, the communities who understand energy very, very well, and they accommodate these new ideas and how to move forward. We have one of the more established carbon management infrastructure systems in the country, not just hard infrastructure in terms of pipelines, but also soft infrastructure in terms of policy and position, Class 6 rules, for example. We have abundant sequestration potential as well, and the ability to utilize that for the continuance of the aspect of the hydrocarbon resource. If you look at southwest and southeast Wyoming, there's all these aspects sort of layer on top of each other and you get hotspots of interest. But the issue with Wyoming and its hydrogen potential is there's no market. You know, like mentioned earlier, we export 90% of our product. And even though we could produce massive volumes of hydrogen, we have to find a way to sell it, right? And so to get beyond that, that's why we have established and become a member of the Western Interstate Hydrogen Hub with Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. That effort is really about addressing those weaknesses that each state has. For Wyoming, we're very, very much upstream focused. We have to find a way to complete that value chain. By linking with Colorado and Utah, we've suddenly done that, right? And there are other benefits and others issues to that as well. The 4 states that can expand, we're open to expansion if it makes sense to include a different state. There are interesting approaches from other states that come in, and we're very open to considering them. We're very much focused on hydrogen today, but we are exploring the opportunity to get beyond that. Not just pursue hydrogen under the Infrastructure Bill Act, but also the other carbon management centered programs as well. But even beyond the infrastructure bill, we're looking towards the potential for that 4-state coalition to create a little bit of critical mass, really, to draw the attention away from California, Texas, Appalachia, Northeast, which typically gets a lot of political emphasis. If we can create that sort of center of mass in the middle of the state, it's not just Wyoming which is competing for capital externally, it's more of a 4-state coalition. That's more of a personal aspiration, but that's something we want to look towards and potentially become a counterpart to other organizations like the SSEB as an example. And I think I'll pause there actually and look forward to questions.
That doesn't work. Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't know where Jason is. Well, I know where Jason is because I can't see him. He's conveniently positioned, so I see a light instead. I don't know. Jason, does that mean you are the light?
It's the light.
Okay. Anyway, you'll understand why I'm harassing Jason in a little bit. But I'm pleased to be here with all of you. Happy to have this conversation. I'm going to start a little bit different than I normally start. I went to school at the University of Arkansas go Hogs. But we at the time I went to University of Arkansas, and I'm not going to tell you when that was, but you'll figure it out. Maybe you'll figure out my age if you're really clever. But when I started, there was like a basketball team, but nobody really knew it. It was kind of one of those things. They gave away the tickets to the students so there would be an audience at the stadium. Freshman year, so, people kind of went or didn't go. The second year, the basketball team actually was doing pretty good, and people decided they would actually go. So all of a sudden now people took those free tickets and actually skipped class and went to games and did all those good things they could do. Well, third year, the team went to the Final Four. All of a sudden, the tickets, you had to pay for the tickets as students. You could buy individual game tickets, but at the end of that year, went to the Final Four. My senior year, you had to buy season tickets, which was a big investment as a student, and you couldn't even get in the state because of the great basketball leadership they had. So I bring that up as kind of talking about the fan base has expanded. Well, I feel like in some of the work that we're doing today, our fan base has expanded exponentially in the last few years. And it's probably around the growth of technology and policy around, and I guess to some extent, the public pressure to really think differently about our energy future in our country and to advance these ideas and technologies that are working. So, but I bring that up just because I think it's kind of interesting. We just recently at the Department of Energy and Environment offered some money for electrification infrastructure, which we've been doing under our Volkswagen settlement funds, but we decided we had to set aside for some DC fast chargers. What we thought, we had gotten a little bit of interest in some of the level 2 incentives that we put out the last couple of years. This year we ran out of money in 2 months, and when we put this $1 million out, we had 60 applications come in, which this will only fund 3 stations, by the way. So it was like, oh my goodness. So the interest and the acceptance and adoption by our cities and our counties and our businesses has been huge. So I know this conference is not about electrification, but I wanted to bring that up as I think that's just a sign of the openness and the direction that the marketplace signals the marketplace is sending, but also where government is trying to resource our citizens. I work for a governor who's like the Wyoming governor, who's friends of the Wyoming governor actually, but takes an all of above approach to energy. And it's largely due to the situation like Wyoming. We are a state that's had a history in energy resourcing. We are a state that has all kinds of options and resources, and we like to work within those resources and expand the future of Arkansas through that. So the governor also serves now as chair of the NGA and this year, and so he's on a national platform talking about a lot of things. And if you don't know much about Governor Hutchinson, he comes from a political background as an attorney, but he served as an undersecretary at Homeland Security, so he's very familiar with working in a federal agency and administering programs at the federal level. But he also had served in Congress and then now as governor, and he has been a very big advocate of efficiency and technology. Now, he would say he's a jobs governor, because all governors are jobs governors, right? But, I mean, he really is focused on workforce development, building out capacity, but he also understands the energy equation in advancing, our communities and our workforce. But as technology is one of his primary focuses, in fact, he was in Boston, I believe, last week, talking about computer education in the schools and how his initiatives push computer education in all the schools in Arkansas, which has been a huge asset for Arkansas, but also builds that workforce potential for the future. But he also is focused on several things, and he's formed several task forces. As we look toward the end of this administration, he's trying to lay framework for things like future mobility in Arkansas. We happen to be the home to a large retail company you've probably heard of. We happen, headquarters of a lot of our agriculture industry. We are one of our tourism industry. So we have a lot going on. And we wanted to move forward on that. So he asked me to chair the Infrastructure Advisory Committee for the state in addition to my day job of Energy Environment Secretary. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that for a few minutes and then we'll open it up for questions. But what I wanted to mention was in our infrastructure planning, as we look at the infrastructure law and the funds that will come down to the state level, the governor urged a regional approach, be it electrification, be it broadband, be whatever water resources, what treatment, be it, we wanted to make sure we were creating connectivity not only within our boundaries but across the country. And that's important as we look at the highway systems, the shipping channels that Arkansas enjoys, and the public-private partnerships that are out there. So so right in that sweet spot is hydrogen. And that came up quickly, conversations with Jason Lanclos in Louisiana, Ken Wagner in Oklahoma. They came to me and said, it seems to fit the these three states in the central part, the heartland of the U.S., the hub of transportation for the U.S., of movement of commerce and goods across the United States, as well of having some of the most significant pipeline infrastructure and right-of-ways, railways, a lot of intermodal opportunities, a lot of large customer demand for hydrogen. If we're talking about long-haul trucks, we have a big investment there. Arkansas now is the leading steel manufacturer in the country with the investment that's been announced by U.S. Steel in the eastern part of the state. And it's all with goals of being green and LEED certified steel manufacturing in the United States is now centered there. So being able to tap into that, plus having a state like Oklahoma who is 50% renewable already with wind power. Arkansas has seen solar go from just a small investment now in the last 5 years to being significant, as we are one of the top 5 states in solar intensity in the country. So we're seeing the build out of solar, particularly across our Delta area where the land is available and accessible. So all that's important as we start looking at what do we do to advance and sustain a renewable energy future. We have, if nothing else, we had a wake-up call with the ice storms last year that we had to have some kind of storage, and we have to do it fast, and we cannot affect the reliability of energy resources or the grid as we go forward. We also have to think through this thoughtfully, and so we're working on things on other resources. But I just wanted to mention the 3 states came together. We formed the HALO Hub. This is a hub that's really, I guess, what I would call, and Jason may have a different way he shares this, but it's demand-centric. We are looking at how can we find and demonstrate hydrogen utilization on the demand side, irrespective of where the hydrogen comes from and how it's produced. We have plenty of opportunity to produce hydrogen in many forms in those 3 states and expand it, but we want to make sure that we can create, if we want this lasting, if we want it driven, the marketplace will ultimately drive the investment. So HALO, that's a simple explanation of HALO. We have some documents. We have an MOU we can share. You can reach out to Jason or myself later. We also have a concept paper that talks about how we see this partnership with public-private partners and the foundation of a grant program that would be established through the HUB grant to build off all those energy sources that we have in the 3 states: nuclear, solar, coal, natural gas, any of those sources. We can, as long as we can create the demand side, and we've got a lot of active interest on where that demand will go and what we can actually show a pretty diverse use of hydrogen going forward. So I'll stop there. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. And I wanted to thank Kristin for her leadership. I know we have the Geological Survey of Arkansas in our department, so we're always pleased to work with your groups across the country. So thank you.
Okay, we do have time for questions. And so just raise your hand. I can start. Direct air capture was mentioned, and I know very little about DAC technologies, but it seems that at least in Pennsylvania, some of the executive staff that I interact with at DCNR think that, well, you just plop down this facility and you're taking the carbon out of the air and that's it. But there's more to it than that, right? So it requires geologic storage or something. I mean, you got it. Once you grab the carbon, you got to do something with it. Can any of you comment on how maybe you have fielded questions like that?
Yeah, sure. So I think Wyoming, and I'm always going to speak with a Wyoming perspective, right? But there's 2 or 3 perhaps DAC or carbon removal projects in investigation, perhaps development in the state of Wyoming. And I think the great driver around it is access to sequestration. Sure, you have to do something with the CO2, you're right. And I think the developers are looking at places like Wyoming and North Dakota, which are the only 2 states with Class 6 primacy. And for that very reason, they're kind of very well positioned competitively, if they have the sequestration capacity as well, to be the first moving sort of locations for the deployment of the technology. That's what we're seeing. I don't know for certain, but I'm sure North Dakota has a lot of interest as well. And I think if the DAC stuff, it's all about getting to the market first, and so they want to go to the places where they can actually get something done, get some CO2 injected, and for that reason, yeah, there's a lot of interest in it.
I'll add to that too. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say the input side is also very important. You know, you have to worry about what you do with the carbon, but the electricity that feeds it, has a significant. It does take a lot of electricity, so you really need clean electricity coming to power the deck as well to make it effective.
Yeah, and like how big of a footprint? Is there a typical size, of land footprint that a facility, or are these things built at slightly different scales depending on the where it might end up?
Yeah, I think that's going to vary. Arkansas has a lot of geological formation that's suitable for it. We have an announced project now in Arkansas, South Arkansas. Louisiana, has an announced hydrogen direct, carbon capture project. I believe Jason can elaborate on that a little bit with some of the folks here in the room. So those are opportunities, but each project seems to kind of look at it at a different scale and a different point of view in terms of how the technology will work to make that total project successful.
Do we have questions? Oh, there's one up here.
Thank you. I was thinking about, the hydrogen hub announcements have come out, but it seems like from at least the request for information, there's a strong consideration for workforce that needs to be incorporated in the planning and designing. So I was wondering if you could comment about what kind of thoughtful planning would be ideal for a successful
About workforce. Yeah,
workforce. You started if you want. We can talk all day long about workforce development. I think we're all going to be struggling. You're all going to be struggling. The engineers, the geologists. I guess it's a good day for being an engineer and a geologist right now with all the infrastructure investment that will go on. And that was part, I know, that underpinned that whole bill. So as we look at it at a state level, we are starting to try to kind of get our arms around what kind of workforce development. But in the hubs, we have a relationship in our proposal. We will create relationships with our universities in our states, which is part of the concept, and y'all might can speak to that in this hub proposal. And we already have a separate MOU among, I believe, our universities, that they're working toward that for our large colleges in Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma that bring to the table, as well as research centers. So I think you're going to see the workforce partly build out of that initiative, but also then, how we work with our departments of commerce to make sure that, and our local regional economic development folks, to make sure that that workforce is fully trained and knowledgeable. We happen to think that Wyoming's probably not too far behind, I'll give you that credit, but we all have trained workforces. We've been doing oil and gas, we've been doing energy, we've been doing resource development for decades, in the heartland. And and you talk to Jason, they've been managing hydrogen for decades in Louisiana. And so the technology, it's not rocket science, we like to say, it's not a special molecule, but having that workforce used to dealing with those issues, taking into account the considerations, it's just a matter of setting the new design and the new priority as we go forward. So that's what I would say to it.
Yeah, and I would agree with just about everything that Becky, well, with everything that Becky mentioned.
Except that you're second to us.
Yeah,
Okay.
except that we're second. But another aspect of that workforce issue, it's a very, very serious issue, right? In terms of the demand on workforce is massive. But it's also, for Wyoming, we also look at it as an opportunity. If these hubs do develop, where they're likely to occur, southwest Wyoming, northeast Wyoming, there's overlap with very heavily impacted communities from the coal decline as well. So that is a massive opportunity for those very well trained and experienced and educated energy workers to step up into a different sector of the energy economy and for the benefit of the local community.
And I would add to that, I mean, it's not, again, this is hydrogen and carbon capture we're talking about, but we're seeing the same thing, like I said, on electrification, battery storage, lithium development. Arkansas now has a lithium play that we're working about developing. I understand coal is now being used by China to create lithium. So I can see a lot of opportunity. So all our workforce, I believe, like you said, it's really an opportunity to take that talent and that knowledge and that experience, which is tremendous. I mean, you can't start developing that in 2 or 3 years. That takes decades of just being in the field and knowing what you're doing. And so I think we are giving that opportunity, and I hope we can bring our millennial workforce up to that. I know there's some of the policy, the negativism on some of this is stemming. I know I work in our engineering programs at Arkansas as an academy member, and that's something that we're challenged to try to make sure people understand that this is a great field and at a perfect time to see transformative technologies develop. And I can't imagine a more exciting time if I was coming out of school to be part of that. So I hope people can get past some of their preconceived or issues and move forward into helping provide solutions.
So FECM has recently stood up a new division, repurposing fossil assets. And so it works closely with the White House Intergovernment Agency on coal and power communities. And so that's one of their main goals, is transitioning a highly skilled workforce, which many of those skills would apply to various carbon capture pipelines or operating gasification or reforming facilities. So that's, we have an entire division dedicated to that now, and it is very important.
Got one up there? Yes.
Technically, I already have the microphone, so hi, Tom again from Glen. I think this is probably a question mostly for Bob, but obviously we'll pertain to others as well. And that is, we're sitting at a carbon management conference. We've now sort of ventured into hydrogen, which there's a direct nexus. There's been mentions of direct air capture. DOE is trying to pump a lot of money out a lot of doors fairly quickly. But from our perspective, we care about all of those things that I just mentioned. We capture carbon, we utilize it, we can take it from direct air capture. We need hydrogen as well if we want to get all the CO2 in a source and convert that to useful products, et cetera. To what extent is there cross-communication within the department on the DAC hubs, hydrogen hubs, all of that money going to, and then this goes back to our environmental justice conversation. That's a lot of infrastructure, a lot of different ways, and so we're really trying to get overlay all that stuff that's happening and make sure it's coordinated. And then obviously that will happen in the real world, in real states, and so hopefully the federal government is coordinating various states as well. Thank you.
So I was trying to pull up a backup slide because I have one slide that shows our different offices that are involved, and so we have a hydrogen engineering science and tech team, meets weekly. It's got EERE representatives, NE representatives, Office of Science representatives. There we go. It's really, we set this up in June of 2020, actually, when we published our hydrogen program plan, which has stood up remarkably well, considering it was produced during the last administration. And so this slide shows you just all the different areas where we have our own swim lanes, but we collaborate in many different areas, and we regularly communicate. And it's really important for us, not just within the Department of Energy, but for instance, the bill Clean Hydrogen Standard, we're working closely with EPA to define the exact boundaries of that and how it'll be implemented, and you know, in 5 years how it would be updated to become maybe tighter. So yeah, we're working with many DOE and other government offices on this effort. It's really key. Thanks.
If I may, just from the state level, we sort of share your view. You know, if you think about if you look at Southwest Wyoming, and sorry for bringing up Wyoming again, but Southwest Wyoming has the Opal gas hub there, pushing about 4 billion cubic feet a day to the west coast. One of the largest CO2 management systems, some of the best sequestration in the country, strong wind. Tell you, it's strong wind. Pretty good solar. You know, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So our conversations into DOE are about those sort of levels. Look, let's not think about a hydrogen hub generally. Let's look at Southwest Wyoming and Northeast Wyoming as a similar story. Southwest Wyoming is a hub for all of that potential activity, right? Let's talk about hydrogen, direct air capture, sequestration. And in the Northeast, it's more about large pilot capture, demonstration plants, sequestration, on and on and on. And then at the multi-state level, like I said earlier, that's where the WISH consortium is all about hydrogen today, but it's not necessarily limited to that moving forward, right? How do you have a 4-state coalition going after all these big programs as well, and also beyond the infrastructure bill? How does we work together more proactively?
Yeah, and I'll just add that too. I think each of these hubs, I think you're right, our boundaries are a bit, I think you mentioned your boundaries are right now 4 states, but we don't see state lines as being hard lines on this discussion. Yeah. We think if we have a chance to do carbon management in Kansas that supports a project in Oklahoma, say, or, you know, or Arkansas working with Missouri, or Mississippi. I mean, we don't see that. Now, we all say beat Texas and Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, but I think that's just football. So, but no, I'm teasing it. We also think, you know, but we will work, and a lot of the companies headquartered in Texas are discussing, you know, how to take advantage of our existing infrastructure and build this out quicker and demonstrate sooner by not having to have significant changes in infrastructure, because the permitting is going to be challenging on this, as we know. I mean, I run an environmental agency too, and we've done a lot to speed up permitting and make it effective at the state level, but we know some of the federal processes and have you know, there's a lot of effort trying to look at how do we do that better at a state level, federal level, and local level, but it has to take into account the community impacts, and the community voices need to be heard and planned as we go through these projects. So I think that's the bottom line, is we've got to make sure that we're doing this in a way, again, if we don't want to have this whole project or effort undermined at the midnight hour when we're ready to go. So.
Thank you. Kristin with Entergy. I appreciate you mentioning the solar build out in Arkansas. We're really excited and proud of what we've been able to do in the state with solar. I didn't realize it was the 5th, so that's I'm excited to bring that back to the team. On the Halo Hub, we absolutely indicated our support for that project, you know, being the utility provider in Arkansas and Louisiana. So we're very excited about you guys doing the MOU between the states and you know, replying to the RFI. What can we as a utility or other industry in those states, what can we do to be better partners? You know, not just in Arkansas, but in across the country. What can we do to better support you know, the state's actions or pursuit of some of these funds, be it hydrogen hubs or, you know, for the DAC or other IIJA funds?
Well, first of all, thank you for your comments, and I'll quickly let others respond, because I know that they also have similar conversations with their utility. This is a utility grid solution. We want to make sure, but we don't stand as experts in how to run the grid, and I think the companies like Entergy and others that can come to us about capacity, about their own infrastructure limitations, their own ways to build this out would be helpful. That joint partnership, if we can remove barriers on policy and on technology or on actual implementation earlier in the process. You know, we need to clearly identify that so we get a full handle on what the cost is, but also what the process is for success or the roadmap for success. So I'll stop there, but that's where we're finding our partnerships with Entergy and others going to be extremely valuable in our hub, but also across because we know those utility companies are the energy providers to the rest of our industry. I mean, when you look at Louisiana, as we look at decarbonizing that industry in Louisiana and you know other industries in Arkansas, they are in those commerce discussions every day, and so be it the co-ops or the Entergies or whoever. But I know that folks in Arkansas want to make sure whatever we do, the lights come on and they come on, you know, and their heat comes on and their air conditioning works 24/7 when they need it. So we cannot risk that in any of these conversations.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add there. I think Becky captured it very well, that the utilities are the final arbiter of truth in a lot of this stuff, right? Because they're governed by cost and resilience. And so whatever grand aspirations that I might have, they're the ones who actually have to deliver it, and in a regulated utility world, meet those two standards. So they're the final sort of bottom line on a lot of this stuff. So speaking for Wyoming, we have had really strong engagement with utilities and very proactive partnerships with them about exploring these opportunities. In fact, just 2 days ago, there was a technical committee in Wyoming at the PSC exploring the idea of how could the utilities help the state work more proactively to create more innovative, friendly sort of zones within the state to enable some of these new technologies. There was a deregulated power zone discussion happening. So the idea being that recognizing that some of these big steps are going to be hard to do in a regulated utility world. And you could spend an hour talking about why it's hard to do. The thought is, can they get around that regulated utility world in some way, in some sort of policy trick to enable some of these, the harder first steps of these transformative energy ideas, hydrogen or advanced reactors or cryptocurrency, whatever it might be, to actually happen in the state without that regulatory oversight, so that it can facilitate the innovation moving forward. So, the conversation was really good. So
that's good.
They're good partners, and they are very, very helpful and very useful to the conversation.
I know. I would just add to that, the Governor's Task Force on Future Mobility, while hydrogen obviously is one of the solutions, that task force was established in Arkansas to basically bring the private companies that are working on drone technology, UAV technology, electrification, hydrogen, self-driving vehicles. Arkansas passed laws. Now we have self-driving warehouse delivery from a warehouse to a grocery store in Bentonville, Arkansas. Probably one of the first in this. I think Louisiana has that authority, but public safety is involved in that conversation. So this group is really trying to hone in on those early answers and ways to create a bed of innovation, because you have to be willing to risk manage this as you go forward when you do innovation. So, but we want everyone to be aware so that we don't make mistakes, because one big mistake could just shut down the process, and so, or at least slow it down for a long time. So I'll turn it back over to Bob.
So one real specific item I can say is the bill legislation required one hub to include power generation, and so again we're looking for utilities to step forward and agree to take some big quantities of hydrogen and fire a turbine with it. So.
Other questions? Okay. Well, again, thank you for everybody staying along this morning, and some of the messages that I've heard, just to summarize our conversation over the past hour. This type of work is indeed an all hands on deck approach with respect to being flexible and open to using multiple energy resources, and the look of that, the pie chart for that is going to be different for different regions of the country. We know that. We as a technical and, a group of technical, engineering, governmental folks. We need to bring everyone along so that education of what is happening or what is proposed to happen and why that's important and how that impacts you directly in your communities is pretty key. And we need to have intentional decision making around the placement of these various hubs. And in some parts of the country, as we heard through the Q&A, some regions may have multiple hubs happening, by virtue of their energy resource mix, where they're coming from. But at the end of the day, I think we have to agree that, I would hope that we could agree that we need to focus on outcomes, and it's not just the technical outcome or the technical success of a project or a hub, the outcome for the communities, the workers who are supporting that, the people that are living here in this country as we intentionally transition our energy resources to away from non-renewables to renewables, and keep fighting the good fight of positive communication. So that's it for us. Again, thank you to our panelists. Thanks to GPI for a great event. Matt, you have final comments?
I invite all of you to sign on as partners to our hubs if you feel so inclined. These are, we are being discretionary as we work with partners. I won't say, but we do want everyone at the table that has an interest and a commitment. So, but I didn't want to leave the table before we talk to all of you in the room that, there is an opportunity for you to engage in a more deliberate and a more public fashion. So if that is driven by an ESG goal or a technology goal or a business goal, that's okay, because this isn't, to me, a government initiative. It's really about how do we incentivize the private sector to adopt this technology. So.
Thank you very much.
We made it. Thanks everybody for coming. We actually finished on time. We met our objectives. Everybody was nice. Just for a few thank yous, I want to thank all of the speakers and the moderators, as well as everybody in the audience for your engagement. Once again, thank the GPI staff for running a great event. Also want to thank our caterers for maintaining our hydration and food supply, as well as the AV folks for all of their work. Just a reminder, these comments were recorded, and we'll share those with you when we're all complete and provide a link. Additionally, if there's any questions that come up that you think about on your plane ride or whatever, feel free to get in touch with Emma and I. One last thing, if you want to become more involved with our work at RDI, catch up with Emma and I, send us an email, and we can allow you or put you on our mailing list for our outreach, our weekly outreach. And then the last comment I have is I've learned a lot over the last couple of days. I hope you all have as well. But I just want to remind everybody the ultimate goal is to go out and build projects, because if we don't build projects, we don't meet climate objectives, and we will not be able to maintain reliable, resilient energy that we need, not just for us, for our kids. So with that, y'all travel safe. Appreciate you coming, and take care.
Walking into the SSEB about to give a speech, and he looked around and he said,
Good to meet you. Yeah.
And I said, absolutely not. But I said, if you want us to come up with a net zero plan,